Good afternoon, my B58 owners. Today we are going to be installing this Remnant Omega 65 turbo kit on my 340i. Currently on my 340i, I literally just have a Chinese intake, a Ross Racing catch can setup, intake manifold, and everything else is pretty stock. So if you are at this point, we're going to be going from how to remove the stock turbo and go through the whole journey of how to install a Omega 65 to the best of my ability. These should be all the components for Gen 1 kit. I do know that primarily they work more with the Gen 2 Supras, but I'm going to see how these kit fits. What are some of the things that we have to modify if necessary, and how to get your Gen 1 B58 car on the road utilizing these kit. Now, I purchased this kit secondhand from a person that wanted to go a different route. So I compiled all of his parts here. So some of them do have nicks and things. So obviously your kit won't come with any nicks or any kind of damage from the actual factory. And then they won't probably come with this sleeving. This is just some heat sleeving that I put on the actual hoses, other than the actual reflectant that comes with the kit itself. But that's going to be personal preference at that point. Now, my recommendation for the install, when you start with the car cooled down, if possible, if you do have a lift, it would be great. But for most people that don't have lifts, you're still able to do this kit perfectly fine on the ground or in your garage with the components that you have in your garage. When you do get started, I strongly recommend organize everything, have a table, go through all your parts and things of that nature, and make sure you have everything necessary to do this job. I'm not going to put it on camera. What I'm actually going to do is remove everything that impedes me from installing the kit, like the radiator fan, the cold pipe, or the charge pipe, the intake, the catch can, and things like that, just to get everything able to install as far as the actual turbo component goes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then in the next scene, I'll have all these components off the car. All right, so now that I took care of all the things I said, like the charge pipe and some of the components that are in the way, like my catch can, we're going to do some small part swaps. The first one that's probably going to be the easiest to start on is probably going to be the upper pipe for the charge pipe. And so on that actual pipe itself, you're going to notice that we have the actual charge pipe. For the first gen, you're going to have this 3-bolt one that's going to match up, make sure everything matches up good. And you're going to notice that you have these sensors that are in the original charge pipe. They go over to the new charge pipe. Now, from what I understand, even if you have your aftermarket charge pipe, just use a charge pipe that comes with the kit. Please don't try to mix and match. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But for the actual purpose of this video, we're using the Remnant charge pipe that comes with the kit, which is the benefit of not having to buy another charge pipe. So we're going to swap these sensors over. And like that, the sensors are swapped over. Two sensors are now here. Like this kit was secondhand. I did purchase it secondhand, so it was missing hardware. So this is not the hardware you're probably going to get, but the bolt that should go there, I'm assuming would be an Allen. It would be a M6x1. Make sure you put it in by hand first to know that's the correct bolt, and then put it in. And then the sensor right here, really thin plastic. Make sure you don't tighten that really tight. The O-ring should seal both of these sensors, and they should be on there pretty good. If you over tighten that sensor, you will snap that sensor, so make sure you do not do that. And then to put that charge pipe on, the first part, you're gonna use your OEM bolts to come off. So just make sure you have those put to the side. Downpipe removed. All right, so removing downpipe. Pretty straightforward. If you don't know how to do it, I'll link you a video. I didn't want to spend all the time showing you how to remove stuff, but there's plenty of videos out there. Remove the downpipe. Remove anything else that's in the way, any kind of connections. I removed the sensors from the wastegate, and now the turbo is pretty much just floating there without me moving the bracket. I'm going to focus on the oil lines and the coolant lines, so that then I can remove the actual turbo assembly out the way. And you're going to have to do probably most of this underneath the car. Is going to be easiest, whether you have a floor jack or if you have a lift. Once you get all the turbo stuff off, all the coolant lines, the oil lines, and I'll post a video showing how to do that using Kern's video. You're gonna get prepped for coolant fitting there, fitting right there, and 2 fittings right here. We'll talk about which ones you have to actually use. First fitting I'm gonna start off with, the easiest one, the biggest one you have in the kit. This is the oil fitting. That's what it looks like. It's got an O-ring on there. It is large. It's gonna go into the block. So that's gonna be the biggest one right there, next to the support bracket. You're gonna put this guy right in there. Now, what I recommend is lubing that O-ring up to make sure it doesn't roll over and it goes in nice and smooth. You're not gonna need a hammer or anything crazy. Just a little force and some lubrication and you should be perfectly fine. Now, if you ever decide to use the return line that came with the OEM kit or the OEM turbo, you can. It's actually a little bit easier to utilize instead of the one that came with the Remnant kit. What you would do is you would cut pretty much right below where the sticker is, if you still have that sticker, or right at that curvature right here, and then they should slide right on the fitting that goes onto the new turbo. And that is the hose installed if you were to use the OEM one, which gives you a little bit more space to actually manipulate stuff if need be. Now, the next one that I'm going to explain to you is why I got this turbo kit secondhand. Gentleman that had this kit before me had a hard time telling the difference between what coolant and oil was. So I'm going to show you guys. On this side of the block, you're going to have 2 fittings. You're going to have this guy right here, that is oil. You know why it's oil? Because there's oil coming out of it. This guy right here, this is coolant. You can guess that there was coolant coming out of that one. The coolant in BMW, blue. Oil, brown. Blue, brown. Do not get these 2 fittings confused. You do not want coolant going into where your oil drain is and vice versa. You will mess some stuff up. And I'm going to show you which fittings to use. When you're looking at the turbo, some of you guys that are installing these kits have probably never actually put a turbo on a car, let alone have looked at a turbo. This is a gravity filled, or gravity drain, I'm sorry. This is the drain. This goes into the big plug. We'll talk about that later. This is where the oil goes into. So oil fill, it's gonna come fill oil in, it's gonna drain it, gravity out. This means that this one and the one on the opposite side is coolant. Coolant flows through the cartridge, comes out the other side. Oil flows through the top, comes out the top. The best way to identify that and what line to use and what fitting to use on that block is very simple. This fitting that we're gonna use is going to be same diameter of that one, along with the AN line that goes together. AN line, fitting, okay? The gentleman that had this put in the wrong area and completely demolished this fitting. It looks like he tried to pull it off with his freaking teeth because it wasn't the right size, it wasn't the right fitting. It did not work. Do not do this, please. Use common sense, pay attention, lubricate this really nice. You don't have to use any excessive force to put this stuff in. There's no need for excessive force when you're doing most of this kit, so just pay attention to what you're doing. If you haven't invested in some kind of grease, dielectric grease, anything that's gonna lubricate it, I like to put some kind of grease on the actual seal just to help with the installation of really anything. I've been doing this for a long time. Vaseline, I don't care what it is. Put it on there, make sure that this ring doesn't roll over, and you won't have any leaks. You'll be perfectly fine. The last fitting you'll have that'll physically bolt in is going to be your coolant fitting. Why is this one a coolant fitting? You can see, here's a coolant filling going to the cartridge. It's going to be same size. Also, it's going to associate itself one of these coolant lines. This is your oil line. This is not going to fit. It's the smallest one. The larger one is what it's going to be. So you're going to have 2 coolant lines, 1 oil line, and then the oil line for the return kit. Put some lube on it. It's not going to hurt anything. Make sure it's lubed up pretty good. And then you're going to go ahead and put it on the other fitting that is not already taken up, which is going to be the top one up there. Popped right in. Perfect. All right, so you have 1 more fitting, and this is the last fitting. It's gonna be a black fitting. It's gonna have a barb hose. The reason why it has a barb hose on it It's because it's actually going to use the original coolant line from the factory. The factory coolant line is going to be that guy right there. You're going to put the barb, and I recommend putting a hose clamp instead of the pinch clamp that they have on there to secure this guy in place. So this guy is just going to go right on there, and that's going to be your coolant line that's going to feed the turbo. So I got all the fittings installed. As you can see, that is going to be your coolant fitting, your oil fitting, your oil return fitting, and then your fitting for your coolant also. So you got coolant coming into the turbo, and then it's going to be going into the block on the top fitting, and then you have, or vice versa I should say, and then you have oil coming out of the block, going through the turbo, and then returning into your feed, and that'll be the actual fitting part of the installation. Now, when you guys are installing the turbo, you're gonna have to loosen the center cartridge. The way you can loosen that is actually with that V-band bolt. I believe that's a 13. You're gonna loosen this so that way this whole thing pivots like so. The reason why is because when you pivot the center cartridge, you're actually going to be pivoting this too to put on there correctly. Now, you wanna make sure the hose is on there good. It's barbed on both sides. You're gonna have these clamps here. And I do recommend probably using somebody to help you. The first time I did it by myself, and I'm probably gonna do it by myself one more time. But like I said, we're just gonna make sure that we're gonna mate with that guy. So I'm gonna put it on here, hang it from this flange area, and then make sure that is hand tied as best as I can before I do anything else. All right, so I'm gonna show you how to actually run these lines, and I'm sorry if it's a little loud. My coworker is working on a customer's Subaru, but the turbo is actually gonna mount this way, and so you're gonna see that there's the return line. I'm gonna show you how to mount that correctly with the kit, and then you have your coolant lines here. So coolant line here, coolant line here, and then you have your small 4AN oil line, oil feed line. So in all reality, you probably don't need to mount all the lines on there, but I would recommend it. This line's the most important line right here. This is the rear of the turbo that's going to be against the block. And so you're going to notice it's going to have a 90. It's going to come out to a straight. Okay, so that one is pretty much impossible to get to from the rear. So you're going to have to make sure this is tightened. And I put it on a 90-degree angle from the turbo, so it's going to feed the block all the way across. So I would recommend putting this one on there first. And then if you want to put this on, you guys can. Now I have the turbo in the car. I didn't use another person. I just used myself. My left hand, I held the turbo in place, and my right. And I'll show you guys right now. I went ahead and did that. So what you want to do is make sure that is not kinked. Right now it still has some play, so I want to make sure that it's as straight as possible. But if you see that kinked or something is not lining up correctly, then you know you have it wrong. So make sure that it's straight and that it's into the block. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it. Right now it's just hand tightened, but it's on there seated correctly. Take your time with this stuff. I know a lot of people working on cars, they get impatient, and impatience leads to messing things up. So make sure you just take your time with it. If you need help, ask for help. I know I need help once in a great while, so it's not a big deal. So this is where we'll lead it. The next thing I'm gonna do is just start getting my lines in place and kind of see where I wanna do the other runners and how I wanna route all that stuff. All right, so progressing forward, we have our lines in. And like I said before, if you're having trouble, you can just do the rear line. To make sure that you can get it tight on there. These two lines you can probably do without having the lines on the car yet, if you have the correct tools or the wrenches, but it just makes it a little bit easier. So everything's in there, everything is tight, the corresponding lines go here. Try to keep everything together to make sure they don't bind up together. Like I said, I got this sheathing, but it's kind of hard to see, but let me get some light on that. So you can see I have all my lines that go to the corresponding areas, oil feed, and then that's coolant on that side, coolant on the other side, and then there'll be a coolant line running to the back Right now I'm getting ready to put the manifold portions on. So you're gonna get the rear manifold on first, and then you're gonna clamp it down, and then I'm gonna try to get the front manifold on, depending on how the wastegate is. I might actually do the wastegate install first, but I'm gonna have to look at that right now. I'm just, overviewing everything that I did, make sure everything is correct. I kind of want to test fit the charge pipe. One thing that I did notice is that the charge pipe seems to be a little bit longer, and as you can see, it is marked. I might have to modify that. I believe on the other chassis, there might not have any confrontation with fitment, but this is something that is still being worked on in Gen 1. So I've talked to Alec, and he's been very cooperative with this. So just anything that I see that I would need to modify, I'm just getting with him, and it hasn't been really anything much other than some small things like this. Maybe the intake, I have to kind of get with him to see what we can do. So most likely I am going to modify this just boost pipe, and really it's really simple, just taking some off the top, and I'm going to show you why that is. So with the coupler on the turbo, with the charge pipe coming up to that portion of the charge pipe, looks like I am going to have to remove about 3 inches of charge pipe for this to fit correctly. So now I got my charge pipe on. It's easier to take this off and then fit this in there. Come down, make sure that you try to angle it to where it isn't putting pressure on the radiator hose, or at least the lower radiator hose. With the modification, it does kink a little bit. Like I said, I'll talk to Alec about that. Kind of needs to, this pipe needs to extend out a little bit longer so it doesn't do that, but it will still work. So that'll be installed that way. For the wastegate side, I just want to make sure I have that little this wastegate flapper adjustable arm off of it if it's on your setup, and we're going to adjust this arm according to the instructions that I was sent. I'm going to go ahead and take this guy off. It's only held on by 1 bolt. I want to make sure I don't really mess with this too much, so try to leave that the way it is. We will have to loosen this to get the arm off itself once we take this off. And then I'm going to show you how to use the supplied hardware to actually bolt this up to the new turbo. Per instructions, this arm between this point and this point have to be somewhere between 79.5 to 82 millimeters long. And what's going to happen is when you install this whole kit, if the check engine light turns on related to the wastegate, you'll then make adjustments on the actual arm first until the actual code goes away. So we're going to go ahead and adjust this to the shortest length, and then which is 79.5, and then we'll go from there. So now that I have that set up, I'm going to get the wastegate. I did is I took this nut off, all the way off. I left that nut secure, it's not really secure, but it's right there. Didn't want to move any of this really. So I left this like this. I'm going to take my last bolt off, and this whole wastegate should come off, and you should be able to mount it onto this bracket right here with the original existing nut to make sure that they're secure. Now we're going to do the wastegate. You're going to remove the wastegate from here. You are going to unbolt the top nut on this side, but you're going to retain the bottom nut in its place. What I find out is that it looks like you have to remove the actual heat shielding. Is actually put it on the actual mount on the new turbo. So what I did is actually colored the screw behind the nut, so that when I pull both screws out and the new piece, I know where to put it back. So I want to keep it kind of in the factory location. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. That's what it should look like. Factory heat shielding off. The new adapter then is going to go on this adjustable arm right here, and then you should have hardware that is going to bolt that to the new component. All right, so it's been a solid month since I returned to the video aspect of the install. The last part you should have solved is the wastegate part. I got sick in between, but I'm gonna go ahead and continue some of the stuff. So you should already have the turbo in, the wastegate would be installed. Make sure the C-clip is in on the wastegate side. and then the downpipe, and pretty much putting all the ends and odds in. I do not recommend putting the heat shield on yet, because you're going to want to make sure that the wastegate is not binding, and I'll put a part of the video of an actual wastegate, what the wastegate was looking like. Make sure that it's in mind. Because what will happen is if that does occur, you're going to get a check engine light. Either the wastegate arm is too long or too short. And then you'll have to essentially get it reprogrammed and things like that. We don't want to do that. So you're going to make sure that that's off, and you're going to adjust it accordingly. Now, this car, like I said, it's been driving for a month. The first install, I have not had to modify or adjust the wastegate one bit. Now, I noticed there's a couple of companies, a couple of shops that are installing these kits wrong, and they're blaming the kit itself. There is nothing wrong with this kit. It's purely install error on their behalf. And I'm surprised there's a lot of big shops that are doing this. But when you adjust the wastegate, you're going to notice there's two nuts on the actual wastegate from the OEM one. All you have to do is tighten that really tight. Like, you're leaving them loose, the wastegate's coming loose. Like I said, I've had this for, probably a little bit longer than that, because I installed the kit in around Christmas break, and it is now going to be the middle of February, or coming up to, early February, and the car's been running perfectly fine. At the moment, I'm getting tuned by Subpar Tuning. Doug has been doing a great job, and the car is super strong on pump gas. And I'll be transitioning to flex fuel here in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. The intake is pretty interesting. I'm sure there's going to be an iteration that Alec will probably make. Does it fit? Yes. I wouldn't say it necessarily fits good. It's a pretty tight fit. I'm going to show you how I made this work. So in this kit, you should supply a pipe that looks like this. That's going to include where the MAF sensor actually sits into. You cannot, I believe on the second gen, this sensor can kind of be installed one way or the other. It has to be installed in this direction because of the way the sensor, how it flows. Air is going to flow over the sensor. I was told, like on a second gen car, like a Supra or an M340i, the sensor is going to be different. So you got to make sure on the first gen, sensor has to be pointing this direction the correct way, and it should be within the proximity of where the wire should go anyways. The filter that comes with the kit, I don't know if that's going to be the main filter. It is pretty gigantic. It looks really cool. But the fitment, it's a little tight. It's been working perfectly fine. And then the part of fitment that was a little challenging was going to be the intake sits really close. This is not a permanent fix, but at the moment I put a piece of hose on there just in case it rubs. The kit came with, like I said, I bought it secondhand, so it did come with some rubbing before, but I believe it's just the guy that had it just didn't install it correctly. And then everything else is just me really related to the Ross kit. I love this catch can setup. It is a mandatory thing that you have to have with this kit. I've seen people on the forum asking if I have to. Yes, you have to. So there's no real way around this. And I just modified the cover, and I'll pull this cover off actually so you can see what it looks like under here. So with my catch can setup, when you do the PCV delete, it usually comes with a hose that you can actually run somewhere else. But at the time being, so they just have kind of just the vapors coming out. I did put it back into the intake track. This is completely optional. You can run it the way that Matt Ross wants you to run it, which is just out the back and down low. But I just don't like sitting outside of my car and smelling oil. So I have this part of the hose. This is my own custom hose. I just use push lock. That's going to go downward and then up into the catch can. And then this one, which is going to be venting, is going to be going down and then back into the actual intake. One of them is blocked off because I blocked off the crank pressure, which hopefully in the future I'll actually put that back in there, but I want to alleviate crank pressure. And then the other hose, you'll notice on the opposing side, which you can't really see, is going to be where I have the catch can venting back into. So it is pulling vacuum on the actual system. And I'll be changing it in the future, which I'll actually be doing a Venturi setup in which you'll be pulling vacuum using the exhaust flow. But what you'll want to do is, first thing, you'll have an elbow that's a silicone elbow. you need to run the silicone elbow down there because it's kind of hard to see. Sorry. But there is going to be your fittings, your turbo fittings going to be down there. And the turbo fittings are going to be slightly pushing up against the elbow. And this is why you can't run a metal intake on there. So you'll do the silicone elbow. That's going to go to the elbow with the actual fittings. And then you're going to use the solid silicone coupler. And then you're going to have your elbow with the actual mat fitting to the system. First, I was like, there's no way it's going to be put on, but it does work. I have no issues, no rattling. Everything works perfectly fine. Once I've made sure that everything worked good with the actual wastegate, I went ahead and installed the Remnant Performance Heat Shield, which is a really awesome piece to put on with the required hardware. If you look at them, there's going to be black spacers to go here and here, and then your hardware, and that's going to bolt everything up. All your oxygen sensor hoses should be out the way. I recommend if they're coming close to the downpipe, because usually the O2 sensors attach themselves to the factory heat shield, which is going to be probably this metal component right there. I recommend just taking a zip tie and just kind of putting them out the way to make sure they're not making contact with anything. One modification I did a little bit later too was I changed the coupler. You probably could use the coupler that was on there, but this one gave me a little bit more peace of mind. Number one, it is reinforced, so it's not going to expand like a normal coupler. This is a coupler that you would usually see like on a diesel truck. They're really cheap on Amazon for like $20. It's a 3-inch coupler, 6 inches long. And number two, I had a little gap in the middle with the smaller coupler that was like 4 inches. That 2 inches made a big difference, and now I'm able to kind of get the consistency in the pipe. I didn't want this to pop off. And number three, when I did everything, I have zero clearance problems as far as like radiator hose. You should not have radiator hoses touching anything. Everything should be factory, including the hose that's on the bottom, everything. So make sure everything is good. I know my brother-in-law installed a kit and he was having some trouble, so his option was to do a radiator hose modification. I try not to modify them too much. I like to keep everything factory, so this was a way for me to not modify the radiator hose below and then able to do this. So listen, the kit has been great. I had zero issues with it. Tuning has been awesome. Strongly recommend it. I'm gonna go show you some T51R noises, this is super, super loud on this car. I love it. It's super addicting. And the goal, like I said, is somewhere around 500 on pump. Hopefully a little bit more on E30, E40. And then when I actually do port injection and the motive, maybe 700, give or take. So if you have any questions, please let me know. The other thing too, when you're doing the kit, I strongly recommend doing all the normal stuff on these cars. Like, I'm doing some of the emissions delete stuff, water pump, some radiator hoses, things of that nature, so that when you start getting into boost and running heat through here, that you don't have any kind of failures other than that. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help you and walk you through it. And I'm sure Alec will send people my way. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a good day.